There's something very wrong with the CR 1/4 skeleton. Can you see what it is? It's got the same number of hit points as a level 8 fighter. What if I told you this was normal? Expected, even. This skeleton exists because I decided to follow directions. Directions from Wizards of the Coast. Directions that I got from the Dungeon Master's Guide. In Chapter 9 of the DMG, there's a section that's all about creating monsters. At first glance, it's got good advice. If you can follow the steps in that section, you should be able to create monsters that are of comparable difficulty to those in the monster manual. Except, you can't. The information in the book is wrong. There's a whole table of bad data that's been immortalized in paper and ink, and it's this one right here. According to Jeremy Crawford, monsters in the Monster Manual were created using completely different information than what's in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They use their own internal calculator over at Wizards of the Coast that maps abilities and traits to challenge rating, and it helped them create the monsters that got published. The table that you find in the Dungeon Master's Guide, however, is just a loose extrapolation of that. It's an attempt to simplify and reverse engineer the monster stats that made it to publication. But unfortunately, it's wrong. How do I know this? Because somebody else did a lot of work. In 2018, yeah, I know that was a little while ago, Paul Hughes over at blogofholding.com gathered up the statistics for the creatures inside the Monster Manual and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. He graphed their AC, their hit points, their damage output, their saves, and compared that to what's in the Dungeon Master's Guide's instructions for creating monsters. And what he found showed a huge gap in the instructions' suggested output and what was published. This clearly showed that the instructions in the DMG were not used for creating the official monsters. The results were just too far apart, and when we compare them on a graph, we can clearly see the disparity. Now right here, we have a graph of hit points, which has the biggest gap of all the data points. This graph compares the suggested hit points from the DMG to the average hit points for each monster of a given challenge rating. That big dip there at CR 18, that's a Demilich who only has a quarter of the hit points suggested by the DMG. This right here is why my CR 1/4 skeleton would wipe the floor with a level 1 party. You can see plain as day that what made it to publication in the Monster Manual is nowhere near the guidelines from the DMG. Thankfully, not everything is quite as off as hit points. The suggested values for armor class match up really well for each challenge rating, and the damage output, it's pretty close. The official monsters still kick out 10 to 20% less damage than the DMG says they should, however. But then we get to attack bonuses, where we see another huge disparity. Creatures in the Monster Manual have much higher attack bonuses than what the DMG says they should. So if you followed the guidelines in the DMG, you'd end up with a creature with much higher hit points and a much lower chance to hit anything than what's in the Monster Manual. Now, in addition to all of that, Paul even discovered that the creature's abilities, like Paralyze and Regeneration for example, had no real impact on their CR or other stats, which is the exact opposite of what the DMG says should happen. With these discrepancies and disparities in mind, Paul set off with 3 goals. Goal 1, make formulas that would create monsters that have stats like those in the Monster Manual. Goal 2, create instructions that people can follow to use those formulas. Goal 3, make those instructions short and sweet. I don't know how long it took him, but Paul succeeded in all 3 goals. The output of his formulas are super close to the published monsters. His instructions are pretty easy to follow, and as a bonus, those instructions fit on a business card. Short and sweet. Unfortunately, I'm not big on business cards, or the people who give them to me. I'm weird like that. Thankfully, Paul expanded the instructions to fit a full-size sheet of paper, and he removed most of the math in the process, which works really great for me because I'm horrible at math. I've been using these instructions to create my monsters, and it's been going great. They feel well balanced, they deal a healthy amount of damage, and they die in a reasonable amount of time. Now I've got a collection of monsters all ready for you to download, including the Abyssal Dread, the Gloomrot Treant, a swarm of Shadelings, and more. All of that, plus our guides and adventures, are available over on Patreon. This drop contains 10 original monsters, and our latest adventure is the Shadow over Middledew, where your level 7 party must track down and contain a spreading infection. Again, you can get all of this for just as little as $1, so use the Patreon link down below to check it out. Now, let's go ahead and use Paul's monster creation guidelines to make another skeleton and see how it stacks up against the official stat block. If everything goes well, it should line up pretty closely and be nearly identical. This is a CR 1/4 creature, so it should have an AC of 13. Check. It should have 15 hit points, which is just a couple higher than the official skeleton stat block. Good there. The attack bonus of +3 is 1 away from the +4 the official skeleton has, and it does the same amount of damage per round at 5 points. Our skeleton doesn't have any abilities that need a DC, so we don't need to worry about that, and its save bonus is right on target at +2. Everything looks great. Alright, so that's a low-level monster. There's not a whole lot going on with a skeleton, but what about something more powerful at, say, CR 10? Let's go ahead and do an Aboleth. Alright, so we've got a target AC of 16. The Aboleth has 17, which is within normal bounds. Then there's a target HP of 150, compared to the Aboleth's 135. The directions say that we can go up or down 50%, so we're good there. Its attack bonus is right on the mark at +9, and the directions say it should do about 50 damage each round, plus or minus 50%. Its Enslave ability has a DC of 14, which is pretty close to the target of 16, and its intelligence save is +8, right on target. So here we see that both a CR 1/4 creature and a CR 10 creature fit within these gloriously simple directions. If we mapped out a bunch more monsters, they'd fit really well too. I mean, sure, there's going to be a few outliers like, dragons and whatnot, but that's okay. They can be glorious in their outlier-ness. Suffice to say, if you're making a monster from scratch, don't look at the DMG. Maybe just tear those pages out of Chapter 9. You can download the Blog of Holdings Monster Creation Guide using the link in the description down below. Happy monster creating, and definitely go to Patreon to check out the monsters that we've got for you and the original adventures.